The release of the detainees is a critical part of the peace process. If you can expand on the role Arab mediators such as Egypt and Qatar play in ensuring successful exchanges and the durability of the ceasefire agreement.
Well, thanks, Salma, for having me. Indeed, we're approaching the near the end of the first phase of this shaky ceasefire agreement. Next week is supposed to witness the release of the last group of bodies, Israelis who were held by Hamas. But the more critical part is supposed to start. Actually, it was supposed to start more than 3 weeks ago in terms of negotiations over the second phase of the ceasefire deal, which is due to witness the full withdrawal of the Israeli troops and the end of the war. Of course, the Arab mediators, namely Egypt and Qatar, played a very important role throughout the past few weeks whenever there was a problem or whenever there was a dispute over the implementation of parts of the agreement. That happened several times, including the latest incident concerning the body of the Israeli woman who was held by Hamas and was mistaken for another body that was delivered to the Israeli side. So whenever there was a bottleneck, whenever there was a serious dispute in terms of interpreting the agreement, that's where the role of Egypt and Qatar came in to settle those disputes and to ask both sides to abide by the agreement. Of course, the Israelis committed many violations, including the killing Palestinians in different parts of Gaza and also delaying the implementation of the humanitarian part of the pact in terms of the amounts of humanitarian aid that was allowed.
Yes, sir, sorry for cutting in, but I would like to build on what you said. With the near completion of the first phase of the ceasefire and detainee exchange agreement, what are the chances that the negotiations of the second phase of the agreement will succeed?
Well, to be honest, there are obviously certain extremist members of the Israeli government, perhaps including Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu himself, who want to go back to war, especially after the display of force that we've seen by Hamas in all the several exchanges that have happened since January 19, when the original ceasefire agreement went into effect. So there is certainly calls by people like Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich calling for the immediate resumption of the war as soon as the first stage takes place. But again, most of the obstacles and the kind of twists come from the Israeli side, and indeed that's where probably the role of the American mediators, namely President Trump's special envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, are supposed to interfere to put pressure on Israel in order to respect the agreement that was signed and to start carrying out the second phase of the agreement. We've already heard statements from Hamas saying that they want to have one big deal, exchanging all the prisoners at once as soon as the second stage goes into implementation. But the problem so far is that Israel and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has delayed sending a delegation to either Cairo or to Doha in order to seriously start the second phase negotiation. And that's where, again, we will be very much in need for the U.S. role, the Egyptian role, the Qatari role, in order to bring the parties to start implementing the second part of the deal and to reach a permanent ceasefire in Gaza. And of course, the main challenge will remain who will rule Gaza in the day after, considering Israel's stance and that of the United States, to be honest, that Hamas should not allow to govern Gaza. So the role of the mediators is not only concerning the implementation of the agreement, but also coming up with a concrete plan for the day after in Gaza and for the reconstruction in Gaza, while considering the proposal that was put forward by U.S. President Donald Trump about the transfer of Palestinians from Gaza to Egypt and Jordan, which was widely rejected by mainly Egypt and Jordan, but also all Arab countries, And thankfully enough, I think we've started seeing
Yes,
some
sir,
signs
but
of
speaking of this point, Trump has tailored this statement. He said that it's a good plan, but he's not willing to enforce it. How do you interpret this wording?
Well, I think this is a very important development and a reflection of the very strong stand that was taken by the Arab countries, namely Egypt and Jordan in particular, because they were the two countries mentioned by President Trump as a destination for the Gaza residents. So I guess this wide rejection of his plan, and by the way, it was not only Arab countries that rejected this plan, but also European countries, and including inside the United States itself. We've seen a letter signed by 145 Democratic members of Congress asking President Trump to give up this bizarre plan to transfer the Palestinians because it would amount to ethnic cleansing and something like, a violation of all the agreement that was signed in the U.S. Security Council resolution. I really, really hope that we're putting behind us this weird proposal put forward by President Trump, and that we can move forward towards implementing the agreement that was negotiated by Mr. Steve Witkoff, the personal envoy of President Trump. So that was an encouraging statement, but I hope that it becomes strengthened when the Arab countries that met recently in Riyadh and then later on the Arab Summit on March 4th, they provide another alternative solid plan for the reconstruction of Gaza without moving out any Palestinians. So I guess this is definitely good news that Mr. Trump said he will not force it and that he was speaking about
No,
this
sir, sorry for cutting in, but I have to ask you, I have to ask your intake about an important point. So alongside the comprehensive exchange of detainees, the second phase also includes the complete withdrawal of the Israeli forces from Gaza Strip. What are the chances of this point specifically happening?
Well, I'm sure that the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his extremist coalition is going to seek to place as much obstacles as they can to prevent this from happening. And even when we look at the Lebanon model, for example, even though the agreement with Israel and Lebanon stated that Israel should fully withdraw from the southern Lebanon, they insisted to maintain some sort of military presence in 5 points at least. So I guess best case scenario is that the Israelis leave the vast majority of the Gaza Strip, but I'm sure they're going to look for excuses to maintain any sort of buffer zone between Gaza and the rest of the Palestinian territories. But again, Salma, let's not forget that even the negotiations over the release of the prisoners and the Israeli prisoners held by Hamas is not going to be an easy task because that's the last group, and they include mostly Israeli soldiers. And I'm sure that Hamas is going to be asking for a heavy price in order to release those Israelis who still are held by Hamas. According to the American side, there are about 22 Israelis. 19 of them are Israeli soldiers and officers. So definitely, besides the issue
Yes,
of
sir.
Israeli withdrawal, the exchange is going to be very difficult.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. From Cairo, that was Al Ahram Weekly Managing Editor Khaled Dawoud. Thank you so much for joining us here on Q News.